proclaiming for us, and then give him a quick minute.
Recording in progress.
So the meeting is being broadcast, and to assist with record keep, if you're not happy with this, please leave the meeting now. Thank you very much. So over to you now. Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome. Can we start, please, with apologies? Thompson. Thank you very much. So, declaration of interest. Graham, the screen has disappeared now for me. I can't see the committee. We're having technical problems. It's right, it's back now. Fine. We start again. So, declaration of interest. So, I'll have to declare an interest on item 4 after having a word with Johan Jones. The advice was that I have a interest, and so Evald Glyn will have to leave for item 4, and he will be back for item 5. Anybody else with an interest to know? All right, we'll go on to the minutes. I take it that these are correct. I propose these are correct. And on second, anything that matters arising from the minutes? If not, we'll go on to 4, and I will leave the meeting, and Ivo will be in the chair. So, yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Elwin. So moving to item 4. So this include 1,200 meters of railway track and a new crossing, a new station, and additional buildings, auxiliary engine and carriage building, single box associated development, land Bala. So first speaker, we'll start with Richard James, who represents the park. Can I just quickly, perhaps not all of you know Richard, so can I just introduce Richard quickly? And this application came in, and the ordinary officer for this area is away, so we commissioned, so Richard, we're very lucky to get Richard to work for us over the last few months. So it's the place of Richard James.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Fellow members. So yes, we're here to consider the extension of the Tegid Railway. There's a bit to get through, to be honest, and the presentation is slightly lengthy. I'll try and get through it as quickly as I can and summarize things, but obviously we can come back to issues and discuss them in more detail if needed. Start with just to present the site to you. You can see there the red line boundary in at the existing Penybont station to the south, and then heading north over the listed bridge, over the new bridge, running along the embankment before diverting off, running behind the rugby club, adjacent to the playing fields, through the Green Wedge area here, and then the station area at the top on the edge of the settlement. First plan here just shows the existing situation to the south by Penybont. So you've got neighbouring property to the west, the existing redundant outbuilding Penybont Cottage there, and another neighbour to the east, the listed bridge, before continuing on. With regard to the proposed, just to begin with, you'll see there's a second track being proposed to the north of the existing station. Before curving round then and meeting with the existing to run north. There'll be a new level crossing over the B4403. The existing Penybont Cottage outbuilding is proposed to be demolished. These levels will be raised slightly to provide the level crossing, and a new access is proposed for Lake Cottage here to bring it away from the track. The track then continues over the listed bridge, and I just provide you with a section there where you can see the new levels and the handrail proposed on the southern side. Obviously, the existing station as it is, that's looking back in from the road. So you've got Lake Cottage to your right there. View of Lake Cottage from the existing footpath. That's the Penybont redundant cottage. Looking across the road then to where the level crossing will be over the listed bridge. And there's a front view of the cottage as well. As we move on north over the new bridge, this shows the existing situation. And then you can see the introduction of the track along the left-hand side there. The carriageway itself is shifted to the east, and you'll notice that the footpath on the eastern side is removed, and the bridge is widened slightly to accommodate that. So as you see there, that footway will be removed. This enclosure will be shifted out slightly, and the new track will run down the western side. Moving on, it follows along the new embankment now, which is being completed by NRW, and continues then to run before it comes to its next level crossing for the public right-of-way along the embankment. And you can see there that a gravel bed is in place as part of the NRW works. This photo shows the neighbouring property to the north of the rugby club's car park. The level crossing that's been put in. And then track continues behind the rugby club before dropping down to the playing field levels. So there you see the gravel track has started to drop down. It will continue thereafter then on the north side of that hedgerow, so on the playing field side, with the footpath the other side of the hedgerow. Then we come to the first of the station buildings. So within this Green Wedge section then, in the next field along, there's a locomotive shed with an associated concrete slab and a runoff track as well. This is taken from the public footpath, so looking north. So the track will be the other side of this fence line. Obviously looking back to the playing fields there, you can see the extent of the hedgerow, which will be cut through. And then this shows the location of the locomotive shed. And again, the track will continue onwards through that section where those two smaller trees will need to be removed. This just shows the public right-of-way view looking further to the southwest over the existing agricultural fields. And then as we come into the station area, this shows the existing, so you can see the location of public sewers and water mains, the existing hedgerow or tree boundary to the south, and there's a fence line running down here, which delineates the edge of the conservation area. So as proposed, as we come in to the station area, you have the coal bunker and associated service road, which also maintains access to the agricultural fields to the south. You have a new signal cabin with hedgerow, new planted hedgerow along the southern boundary. The track's obviously running in two platforms either side. To the southern side, you have a carriage building with these trees retained. And then picnic area to the west, a parking area behind the Hywel Allan properties, and the station building itself, which I'm going to in a bit. This shows the locomotive shed, carriage building, and signal cabin elevations. So fairly conventional portal frame, corrugated sheet structures. Save for the signal cabin, which is obviously more modest in scale. And then the proposed station building itself, you can see it's got a decorative facade facing north, fronting onto Plaza Street car park, and then followed by a single-story pitched corrugated section to the rear. Within this building, you have your principal entrance, a retail area, ticket office, toilet facilities at ground floor, and then the cafe with outdoor seating area as well. And then at first floor level, you have your office space for staff. This photo just shows along the public right of way, the relationship between the neighbouring properties, Ystad Caerfach to the north, followed by the public footpath, followed by then the area where the station buildings will start. Looking a bit more to the southwest there into the station site. And again, looking into the station site, you can see the southern trees existing there. This is taken from the Plaza Street car park. Look, so this will face the main frontage of the station building. And a few more photos just for context to the car park there. This is looking back up Hywel Allan from the station frontage. Next one in the other direction then, looking towards the station. This is taken from the west on the main road in. So the side view, the western side view of the station will be visible there, and you can see the rear of Hywel Allan properties there, where the car park area will be in this area here. And again, another side view there. So these next two slides, I'll just go through these. These summarize the key elements of the proposal, basically, as we heard. The site, given its length, goes through a number of different constraints. The key ones here really being the SAC, the triple SIs and the Ramsar site. It's wholly within the catchment area of this Llyn Tegid SAC. It runs through the Green Wedge, as we said. There's a number of historic assets to it as well. With regard to the listed bridge, the scheduled ancient monument, Castell Gronw, and conservation area as well. This application has been consulted in the normal, proper way. Publication in Cambrian News, neighbour notification, and site notices along the route. Because this is a major development, it's also been subject to pre-application consultation. At the time of writing the report and this presentation, we'd had 12 responses, and the key points are summarised within the report. As an update, in the last week and a half, as of yesterday morning, we've received circa 275 representations from third parties. Haven't been able to go through them all because of the timing, but those I have read are mainly in support of the application. Only read one, which was querying it, and the key points being raised were raising the importance of the economic benefits to the local area, the fact that this will be a key education facility in teaching people about the cultural heritage of the area, promoting sustainable tourism as a key positive for the area, retention of young people, and much needed investment into the area. We've also received a letter from the local MP and AM over recent days requesting this application be deferred. Because of the complexity and length of the site, a lot of LDP policies are triggered for this, for consideration, as well as the higher level legislation in the habitat regulations, the environmental impact assessment regulations, obviously, and national planning policy. So the main considerations, and as I say, there's a fair bit to get through, and I'll summarise each one rather quickly, and then obviously we can delve into greater detail if needed then. It basically follows the structure of the report in the order. So starting with the principle of development, your main planning policies are up there. Basically, because whilst in open countryside location, this is an existing facility, it's an existing tourism attraction and an existing form of economic development. And national and local policy enables the extension of these facilities in open countryside locations. What is rather key there is the definition of what constitutes sustainable tourism. And the consideration is that in principle, this is capable of falling within that definition. However, that's obviously subject to detailed material considerations. Then into the impact on the local economy. The application is supported by an economic impact report which quantifies the benefits to the local area, and they're summarised there for you. Officers have no reason to disagree with this, and I think it's fully recognised that this development will bring significant amount of benefit to the rural economy and the surrounding economy of Bala. Just to quickly touch on the retail outside the centre, because Bala has a designated centre, consideration has needed to be given towards whether it would distract or take any trade from the centre, but given the scale of what's being proposed and the proximity to the centre, that's not considered to be an issue. With regard to the impact of phosphates then on the SAC, the application, as we said, lies partly within the SAC, wholly within its catchment, and runs adjacent to the Ramsar site. Because of its nature, the conservation of habitats and species regulations is invoked, and a habitats regulations assessment is required. And the authority is directed in that legislation to only allow development, provided it will not adversely affect the SAC. It's worth noting that although Llyn Tegid is not failing its targets in terms of phosphates, the river downstream is, and we're directed not to increase pollution loads into that river. Bala Wastewater Treatment Works does not have a phosphate permit, and so the application originally proposed to connect into the main sewer, and that was found to be unacceptable because of the increased load into the works. Since then, a number of different options have been presented to the authority, firstly with a temporary cesspool, and then subsequently, it was suggested we could delay the provision of toilets and cafe and limit ticket sales to their current levels. These have been duly considered by the authority, and we've reconsulted with the likes of NRW, held meetings with officers there and with our own ecologists, and given quite a bit of consideration into trying to find a way through and seeing if there is any potential to get around this issue of phosphates. However, as we stand at present, and given Dŵr Cymru's current situation with the wastewater treatment works, officers are unable to find a suitable way forward. And as such, we were unable to conclude a successful HRA. With regard to other biodiversity matters, the application has provided biodiversity assessments, and both officers and NRW are happy with the scope and findings of the assessments, and with appropriate condition, biodiversity mitigation can be appropriately controlled. Turning to the issue of the green wedge, there's a number of elements of the proposal that go through the green wedge. The green wedge wraps around the station building, basically, so it's the land to the west and east of that, and then which runs up to the rugby club. The key consideration is whether it impacts upon the need to retain openness. And after due consideration, the station buildings in and around that area are found to be acceptable because of their physical proximity and links to the main settlement. The track itself running through is found to be acceptable because it's running along existing man-made features, the playing fields and the public right of way. However, the locomotive shed and the concrete slab and associated track is considered to be unjustified in this location. It's not known why it needs to be there, and it just represents a more visible and permanent element of the development, which is a bit more detracted from the rest of the buildings. I should also say that there's uncertainty over the level of acoustic screening that might be required, which obviously, depending on the form, length, location, could have other impacts on the green wedge as well. Turning to cultural heritage, this is broken down into a number of elements. Dealing firstly with the conservation area, the main issue of concern here is the station building. It's going to be a prominent, widely visible building within the conservation area itself and its wider setting. That in itself is not a reason to restrict development. However, officers do need to be confident that it's going to conserve and enhance the character of that conservation area, given its prominence. And it's felt that based on the level of information we have at present, we haven't got enough confidence that it's going to actually conserve and enhance the character. Turning to the listed bridge, again, in principle, it's recognised as a positive in bringing a new use to that listed bridge, a new reason to keep it maintained and retain its active use. However, there's considered to be a lack of detail on specific elements, namely the handrail, in terms of, for example, the fixings, the materials, the finishes, the colours. And given this is a listed structure, such details really do need to be in place before the decision is made. With respect to the loss of Penybont Cottage, it's recognised as a building of local importance, and both the National Park Authority's Historic Environment Planning Officer and Gwynedde's Archaeological Planning Service has noted the lack of internal assessment on this building. So we've been unable to conclude on its true significance, and therefore at present, its loss is considered to be unjustified. Finally, turning to the setting of the Scheduled Ancient Monument, Castell Gronw, visually considered acceptable. However, both Cadw and Gwynedd Archaeological Planning Service have noted the absence of the geophysical survey. The applicant hasn't been able to access that land to conduct a survey, and given the significance of what might be found there and its potential impact on the development, again, unfortunately, that we don't have sufficient information to come to a conclusion of its impact. Just finally, on the wider historic landscape, the environmental statement submitted has provided an assessment, and all statutory consultees and officers are happy with the wider impact in that respect. In terms of landscape, just dealing with the remaining elements, basically. So firstly, the carriage building itself. whilst it is noted as being slightly uninspiring, it is considered to be functional in its use and appropriate in its design, and with appropriate conditions to perhaps improve that frontage onto the platform is considered acceptable. So too is the surrounding areas and the proposed landscaping works. And with regard to the wider landscape views, members will have copies of the viewpoints provided in the pack, and the wider landscape impact is considered acceptable, which NRW agree with. In public rights of way, physically, there's been no objection, received no concerns with regards to the impact. Operationally, key consideration here is what the railway will do to the recreation value, particularly within that green wedge where it's less developed and a bit more tranquil in nature. Again, after much consideration and based on the 2022 timetable, which is the only firm timetable available for consideration in the application, it's considered on balance to be acceptable. There's still significant parts of the day where trains won't be running, and so the shared use of those areas is considered acceptable. With respect to amenity, the environmental statement has provided information with regard to noise, vibration, dust and odour. With respect to noise, the Pollution Control Department has advised that these acoustic barriers will be required to protect the amenity of neighbouring properties. We don't have details of that, and we haven't been able to reconsult on their effectiveness. And so we are unable to conclude there's going to be an acceptable impact on amenity until we have those details. Also, vibration is noted as requiring a bit more information just to substantiate the conclusions made within the submitted assessment. With regards to highway safety, members will note we've had sustained objection from the Trunk Road Agency, which direct and Welsh Government direct the authority to refuse this application. I am aware that discussions are ongoing between the applicants and Welsh Government. However, as we stand today, with those objections, we're unable to conclude an acceptable impact. With regard to the Highways Authority, whilst they haven't logged a formal objection, they have raised certain concerns. One being the potential for vehicles to leave the carriageway and enter the railway, and what will happen to passengers if there is a collision, what measures are in place to minimise that. And given the potential severity of that consideration, it's my view that we need to have those details in place before we come to a conclusion on this. With regard to flood risk, just very quickly, the flood consequences assessment was submitted, and following an initial round of consultation, additional information was submitted, which has satisfied NRW requirements and officers, so flood risk is considered acceptable. Drainage infrastructure, again, sustained objection from Dŵr Cymru with respect to the developments over its assets within the station area. Dŵr Cymru require accessibility to these in order to ensure their maintenance and repairs. And with those objections in place, we're unable to conclude an acceptable impact. And finally, with regard to the Welsh language, in line with policy DP18, a community linguistic impact assessment has been submitted. And again, following an initial round of consultation where the authority sought advice from Iaith, this assessment was updated, the commitments to their strategy was strengthened, and that is concluded to be now acceptable with an appropriately worded condition. So to conclude, the application has been subject to extensive and repeated consultation, and due consideration has been given to the options provided to try and combat the phosphates restriction. And whilst it is acknowledged that the proposed development will bring key benefits to the area, we are in a position today that we're unable to recommend approval because of the unsuccessful habitat regulations assessment and the other material considerations as been discussed. So the recommendation before you today, members, is to refuse the application for a total of 7 reasons. The first, dealing with the phosphates issue and habitat regulations assessment. The second, there deals with the impact upon the Green Wedge. The third on the conservation area. The fourth on the remaining elements of the historic environment. The fifth with respect to amenity. Sixth with respect to the highway safety, and seventh with regard to Dual Cymru's assets. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So we'll move on to the speaker. Can I invite Dwyn Morgan, representing the Town Council? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm glad that I'm not boiling an egg or I'll be out of time. Thank you for the opportunity to give a few comments, and I express my full support for the application in front of you. For the candidate, it is Llyn Tegid, has engaged and consulted consistently and thoroughly with local stakeholders, with the Town Council, and I'm pleased to say that the Mayor is here today to represent the unanimous support of the Town Council, the Llanuwchllyn, Llangollen, Llandewen, and the Council's local organisations, local schools, and so has held a number of events to share information about this particularly good scheme and to bring the railway back to Bala. The first time since 1965, responded promptly to any inquiries about the scheme. So there's a strong feeling of local ownership, local community ownership of the scheme. And I think it's important that this voice is heard today. Of course, the economic advantages are clear for the Bala area and the Llanuwchllyn and beyond in terms of the use of local resources and buildings, businesses, as well, employment and apprenticeships. But it's also important in development, the principle of sustainable tourism, and it will promote essential response to the toilets, to parking, toilets, and so on. And the present location, Pen-y-bont, is totally unacceptable and unsustainable in terms of parking and allowing access to the inhabitants of Llangollen to their own community. And there are no facilities at all on the present site. In terms of the comprehensive report, 128 pages, I must accept and thanks for your commitment as members of the commitment to read and analyse and form an opinion in just a few days after receiving it. Of course, respecting our unique heritage is important to all of us, particularly for us, the inhabitants of the National Park. And I really fully understand that you as members of this committee will make this important decision and take all these matters into considerations. I would also, for information, note that the work has already started to some extent. I will close, therefore, since I'm running out of time. Can I just conclude? No, those are the rules. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So can I invite the
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a unique community project that's not without its complexities. It's a proven fact that heritage railways help underpin local economies while preserving the importance of the area's industrial heritage. By extending from Pen-y-bont to a site in Bala, it would relieve the parking problems on the B4403, which has proved to be an issue, as well as being a location with no facilities. It's taken over 9 years to get where we are today. We submitted our planning application in October 2021. £1 million has been raised in financial donations, and a further £400,000 has been donated in professional services. The money raised thus far has gone to landowners for land purchases, consultants, and £300,000 was paid to Natural Resources Wales as part of the flood defence upgrade scheme. All this is local to Bala. We'll be creating new jobs, both directly and indirectly. Market analysis indicates an incremental spend of £1.3 million in the town and surrounding area as passenger numbers increase over future years. With the station in Arran Street, it will draw the town and Lake Foreshore closer together, and the businesses will benefit. With connections to the T3 bus service at either end of the line, it will be part of an integrated transport system. We will provide a facility for visitors to get out of their cars and explore the local area by train. The Bala Lake Railway is a not-for-profit community organisation. The proposed railway is entirely dependent on fundraising. It's critical to the project that planning permission is secured to enable the trust to apply for grant aid and other contributions and support for the development. We're still in the process of resolving some matters. Our consultants finally met with the Welsh Government Trunk Road Agency last Friday, and together we now have a way forward. Consultations are taking place with Welsh Water to address their concerns regarding protection of the existing pipeline. We will comply with the Public Protection Officer's recommendations regarding provision of acoustic fencing and vibration mitigation measures. The Welsh Centre for Language Planning endorses our community and linguistic impact statement, subject to one minor amendment, which we're happy to incorporate. We heard yesterday regarding the archaeological potential at Castle Mound. It's been surveyed and identifiable activity as post-medieval associated with the previous railway station. This project has a significant lead-in time, at least 3 years. So with regards to the phosphate discharges, we propose to cap our visitors at Bala at the current level until such time this issue is resolved. If permission is not forthcoming today with conditions, we request the committee defer any decision on the application in order to allow this progress of these matters to continue. We would also suggest to the committee a site visit. For planning permission to be refused now would be forever to the detriment of the economic prosperity of Bala. Diolch yn fawr.
Can I just ask if any, Richard or John, did you want to say anything before we open it up to the floor? No. I may need to come in at conclusion stage. So I'll open it up to the members present. Elfed, can I see a photo of Penabont Cottage again, please? The small white building by the bridge. Can I see that again, please? This has been mentioned quite a lot. Could you remove it and erect it elsewhere? Could it be relocated locally rather than demolishing it and it being lost from the local community? It would still exist somewhere rather than losing it totally. I think it looks good in the countryside, but could it be relocated to assist with this application? The other point, the sheds for keeping the engines in. We have new sheds in Porthmadog now. Could we possibly reduce them or include more stonework? The cladding, for example, in stone, to make it more easy on the eye, perhaps? I don't know if that's a valid point or not. The other thing, certainly I've seen in this area that there are 2 young people who have been working for the railway and they've been able to buy houses in Llanfestiniog because they've had apprenticeships with the railway. And like I said, they've been able to buy a couple of houses locally in Llanfestiniog, and 2 young people settling in Llanfestiniog shows that there are opportunities for young people in rural areas. And I'm sure it's probably true in Porthmadog as well, that local people can live in local houses. Those are the only points that I'd like to make at this stage. Thank you. Tim? Thank you, Chair. This development would be beneficial to all, but we can't have the detrimental effects on the different elements that have been noted in the report. For me, there's a lot of work that needs to be undertaken. A lot of good work has already been undertaken, but at the moment, there are far too many questions that need to be answered, far too much information that's required so that for us to be able to make a decision on this. The regulation, habitat regulation assessment is one. If we that the impact isn't going to be detrimental, or if it is detrimental, then we shouldn't give it permission, of course. There are another couple of things, really, where there is further information required. We've heard from the applicant that there's a lot of good work going on to fill in the gaps in the information required. The principle is good, in my opinion, but there's further work that needs to be undertaken. Are you proposing the recommendation? Well, I think that we shouldn't make a decision until we have further information. So do you propose that we defer decision? Well, yes, because obviously there's a lot of work that's ongoing. I think that would be the best way forward. Can I just come back on the point relating to deferral? It's because there are a couple of letters, as you've heard already, and MPs have also given their opinion, and they've asked us to defer as well. I think it's important that I remind the committee that this application has been submitted since October 2021. We asked the developer to withdraw the application in February last year and said that it wasn't ready. We referred to transport and different elements, and those elements are still ongoing as well as other issues. This has just come in as a cold application as such to us as officers. We have consistently asked them to withdraw the application so that we could have a complete application. And there's a lot of pressure on officers. We're always getting emails and correspondence, and the developer is constantly corresponding with officers when new information comes in, as has happened. And of course, we also have to reconsult with all of the statutory consultees. We're not here to sit on an application until it's ready, and it's been 18 months now. I agree with the comments that have been made in principle, and that it is in principle good, but I think it's unfair on the officers and the section that we sit on this until it's ready. My advice is that the developer should withdraw the application. He knows what the opinion of the officers are on this application. If they withdraw it, they can work on the elements required. If they were, they wouldn't have to pay another application fee. I'm also concerned about some of the ecological work, which is now quite old, because ecological reports usually have a shelf life of 18 months, 2 years until you have to redo them. So I don't think that we can sort that out by the next planning committee. I do believe this will take quite a few months and perhaps longer towards the end of the year. And on that point, where the survey work is too old, in any case, my clear advice really for the committee on this, although I do sympathise with their situation and we do support the principle, but keeping this application in creates a big headache for us as officers, and it puts a burden on the officers, and it creates an awful lot of other complexities which I won't go to detail on. But so I'm concerned if you were to defer it. So you suggest that it should be withdrawn then? So if there hasn't been enough discussion beforehand, I think I'd like to withdraw the proposal to defer then. My other proposal is for us to ask the applicant to withdraw so that they can sort the issues outstanding and resubmit. Do you have a seconder for that proposal? I'll second that. What concerned me about this was the statute. Some of the statutory consultees are objecting, and there are discussions with Welsh Water, etc. But we haven't had that information. Highways, sewage, and water, if they had been sorted already, until we get the right information in front of us, we can't give it the go-ahead, because there could be major issues involved with those elements. And the major problems could be caused. Really quickly on that, if we thought this is nearly there, and if you bring it back to the next committee, or even the committee after that, we could accept that deferral would be sensible. But I'm not confident, really, that we'll be there by the next committee with the history of the application. Can I just come in with Tim's proposal? We need to be totally clear about what you're proposing. You said that you were proposing that the application would be withdrawn. So could you repeat if the applicant is going to carry on with it as is, then we have no choice but to refuse it. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. I've been listening to that discussion. I'll be interested when we get the actual proposals and terms, because the issue with withdrawal or deferral is a very interesting one. I'm still not clear where we're at with that. But the 2 points I wanted to make was that, similar to June, the issue of the statutory consultees and their concerns with that still not being resolved. We're certainly not in a position to make any decision today until that is either clarified or that is their final position. The question I wanted to ask, and I recall some reference to it, but I'd welcome the views of officers on this in terms of the cumulative tourism impact on the town and surrounding area from the additional visitors that would be brought into town, and the impact on other activities which may already be under pressure. We know, for example, around Bala Lake, we do have those pressures. Do we perceive that or is there any information provided about the cumulative impact of visitors, and as well as the positive economic evidence which we've got, the negative evidence of that, and what the balance is between the two and how that's going to be accommodated? I'd welcome views of officers on the level of detail that we've had on that, and whether we've had sufficient to understand that properly.
Diolch, Brian. Richard.
So it's obviously a very hard thing to quantify in terms of cumulative impact on businesses and existing activities. How many visitors are attracted for a railway alone, or how many are going to go on and use other facilities, etc. So in terms of the information that's being provided, it's quite limited, other than obviously acknowledging the economic benefits. I think it's heavily related to the traffic implications on Bala. Is perhaps a key way to illustrate the pressure that will be brought, and with the objections we've got from the Trunk Roads and the concerns of the Highways Authority, who also share the points of the Trunk Roads Agency made. It brings us back to the fact that at present today we don't seem to have the information to give us confidence that certainly impacts of traffic can be dealt with properly and not lead to knock-on detrimental effects on the town.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Brian?
Yes, I was also considering the additional littering and so on, but that's even harder to get at. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Cynghorydd Dilwyn.
Councillor Dilwyn. Thank you, Chairman. I have major concerns really about refusing this today. I can't support its refusal. So I would have to propose that we go against the recommendation to refuse. I have several reasons for that. The reasoning that we've heard doesn't enable the officers to support it, can be resolved, and very quickly as well. I can't see any issues with that. With all due respect, I was surprised to hear that there were over 200 letters that had been received, and only a percentage of them had been read, and only a percentage of those that were read, there was only one objection. We didn't even hear that they had objected, that they had submitted their comments, in fact. Bala Council have had a long time to consider this application, and on two different times they've supported it 100%. It suggests that the people of Bala support it 100%. And my opinion, we should find a way to support it, because we have to remember as well, during these difficult times, that this is a historical and very important development for Bala area. Bala in itself is very important, and I wouldn't like to think that some possibilities for the town would be withdrawn. And so I'll leave it with those words for now. But I couldn't support refusing this application, and so I'll take a lead from officers. I take it that I need to propose that we approve it. Well, the proposal is that we refuse it, so then it will be open to the members to come forward with another proposal. So we'll go to the vote first on the proposal to refuse it, and then we'll see what the committee's decision is. If it fails, then there will be, the process will come into force. Well, another proposal can be put forward. Can I just come back quickly on one point? I just feel that I have to defend the officer on not responding to the letters. There's the statutory consultation period where it's usually 3 weeks. It's 5 weeks because it's an environmental impact assessment. It's a major application. So there's a statutory period of 5 weeks, and we've had 2 periods of 5 weeks with this application because of amendments and new information being submitted. So with all due respect to Richard, he was on holiday last week, and obviously some things have happened last week, and so he literally didn't have the capacity to read those letters. Neither did I. We do have other things to do in the office, and so the capacity just wasn't there to read the letters that were submitted so late in this process. The majority of them have been read. It is heartening if the majority have been read. That tells us that there was only 1 out of that majority which raised any questions. And so that in itself speaks volumes. John, thank you for the opportunity to consider this application. I support Dilwyn here, and I will support this application. Anything that supports the rural economy. As you know, Meirionydd is one of the poorest areas in Europe, and it's, of course, one of the poorest areas in Gwynedd. So we have to support any economic development. I don't want to be at the bottom of the pile in 10 years' time with the economy. Still, this area still being the poorest area. We want applications like this that promote Bala, tourism, the economy. Some of the shops have closed, the church has closed, and the pub is closed. There's another village in Llanuwchllyn. I live not far from Llanuwchllyn. It's going to be very beneficial for Llanuwchllyn and Llangower. There are cones everywhere there at the moment. This would remove those cones. We don't want the cones to be there with the cars. We're talking about sustainable transportation on Wyddfa, but it can obviously reduce carbon. Brilliant. Rather than using cars to go everywhere. This is one way of reducing carbon. We're going against our own principle by doing this. Well, the dimension of phosphate. What about the sewerage that's going into the rivers across the whole of Wales? If there are going to be phosphates in the water, you can't blame something because Welsh Water haven't done their work properly. They have been emitting the sewerage into the rivers. And I'm not blaming any farmers in this as either. Biodiversity, that's fine. Screening, etc. Noise, we've had 275 letters, only 1 objection. If there was objection here, the local people would be the first people to voice them. If you have screening work that needs to be done, well, obviously that's essential. I can't object to this because of 2 minor things and all of the good work that's already been done. Welsh Water are objecting because it means that it's more work for them and more investment on their behalf. It's a not-for-profit organization, but of course they need to improve the pipelines, the prosperity of the Welsh language. We have to have employment. If people are going to have money in their pockets, they're going to buy houses, they're going to spend locally. So I don't really see how we can refuse this. It's a win-win situation. Thanks, John. Can I just respond to that? Can I just make sure that there's no misleading going on here? That the phosphate issue is a minor issue. There's legislation involved here that we have to adhere to. And the habitat regulations assessments, the regulations of 2017, the word of the law is that we have to be beyond reasonable doubt that there is going to be an effect on the special area conservation. Can I just finish, John? Our ecologist, we've brought in the expertise of an ecologist to assess this, and he's given us clear advice. There is reasonable doubt that there will be an effect, and there is separate legislation here, and you have to consider this very carefully. I'm sure Iwan might come in here, because if there's a tendency to permit, perhaps we need further legal advice on this. You said that you've had eco experts come in to assess this. Did they say that there was a problem there now, or were they saying if this development went ahead, that would cause it? If the problem is already there, I can't see that we can go against this and stop this development because of that. Because if the problem already exists, then it's up to Welsh Water to do something about it.
I mean, it's very unfortunate we are in the position, and it's across Wales, isn't it? I mean, and it is retrospective in terms of it's the developments now which are being penalised for things that have gone on before. But we are directed not to increase the pollution load into these rivers until the sewage can be properly dealt with, and it's on those basis which the habitat regulations assessment is failing. And you know, as John advised, legally we're in a very precarious position.
But what you're saying is really that the assessment says that it is not this development because of it.
The Llyn Tegid itself, I believe, is compliant, but the river downstream is not. And so anything upstream of that is going to increase on the load on that river. So this is where we come to on the habitat regulations assessment. And it's consistent across Wales, how this is being dealt with.
Can I just clarification on that? The tributary coming in from the mountain, beyond the development is a contributing factor to the phosphate levels.
As I've been advised, that the Llyn Tegid is compliant, but the river downstream is not. So, you know, further downstream, further down the flow. So if anything enters that, which obviously feeds into that flow, it's going to increase the pollution load into that area that's not compliant.
The water's coming out of the lake, not the one going into the lake. So I'm asking.
Water going out to the lake.
To me,
This is complex, and yet it isn't complex.
Right now, then
So you're saying that downstream,
it's
this is feeling how much villages, how many villages and towns
so
are
let's do a Cymru's
emitting that sewage?
It's
It's Welsh Water that needs to sort that out. It's their fault.
And they make
They
enough
say they're
profits.
not for profits. They should improve
so
the infrastructure. The
keep
infrastructure is
they're
all.
not doing their work
Welsh Water
properly.
need to do the work they're supposed to do.
To that point,
Just to make it
we
clear,
wouldn't go so far as to say the river
river
from Bala
from
straight
Bala
down is over
downwards
the threshold.
is
The lake is
over
all
the
right,
limit.
as Richard says.
Gavin
It's the
Dwy
Deith
River,
River
for
is over
example,
the
is over the limit.
the threshold. But it's it's a problem
Are you
after Bala.
saying before Corwen
reaching
or from
before reaching
Corwen?
Corwen.
So it's before Corwen.
It's
That's
the
what you said.
problem. I thought that it was Corwen below. Well, I have seen the clear advice that we have had is not to add to that, or puts us in difficult position legally. Just to come back to Richard's point too, in terms of
Can just
that this is a problem
say this is a problem
Wales,
across Wales,
throughout Wales
and England as well.
There are hundreds, if not thousands, of houses are being refused. Not just this application is being held back. It's not a unique problem. It's frustrating for us. We don't want to refuse things. But in this case, we are in a position where we would advise that we don't have a lot of choice. Can I bring Kim in? You've been waiting a long time, Kim. Hiya, that's all right. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm having difficult to supporting refusing this too, unfortunately, as I'm a young councillor in a ward that attracts tourism. We want to, it helps people to park in the area. It's clearly going to support local employment. So to me, it's very important that local people can stay in their villages. Most of the inhabitants who live in a village or town depend on tourism and the work in that field. People who going into the town, it's too good an opportunity to lose, in my opinion. The money that's going to come into Bala, it's an incredible large sum. So I have difficulty in refusing this, unfortunately, because local businesses are struggling terribly with the costs of living since COVID. We need, we're on the back foot. Yes, it's going to create a bit of a problem about litter and so on, but these can be solved. And the Welsh water things can be solved as well. I have difficulty refusing it, so I support it 100%. Thank you, Kim. Just to explain,
the recommendation is to refuse the application.
Yes. Yes, well, I won't
be supporting
refusing.
The
That's what I was trying to say.
Of the application. That's what I'm saying.
Yes. It's a case come in.
Nobody is going to.
It's an extremely important problem. These arguments are emotional. They're substantial. A lot of questions in this for me. A lot of questions still, certainly, in terms of the agencies and the statutory elements in this application. I would just like to ask, is it possible, technically, in terms of where we are today, that we can come back in time to have more time to think about this, certainly about in terms of the representations? Well, the candidate can withdraw the application. We've asked them to do that on several occasions. No, he has perfectly right to resubmit an application. We have asked him to do that, but to withdraw the application, sort the issues out, but we agree with the principle. We want to see this happening, but the things that need to be done in order for it to be an application that we can support. And we have to make a decision today, refuse or allow. Can I just say, Delyth, if it's refused, it'll be, they have 18 months to resubmit. Well, that's what John is saying. There's a proposal to refuse. And then if it's refused, then you have an opportunity to make another proposal. But so just going to bring Tim in. Has the candidate, Nate, what is the? No, we'd have to have that from the candidate. We are going to discuss the Brian Angel.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me have another comment. I have two. One is in relation to the question of the phosphate issue. I have a lot of experience of that locally to where I live in England. And whilst some of the regulations may be different, the principle is exactly the same in terms of planning applications. We have one here that's been outstanding for 13 years because of the phosphate issue. And that's a big application in our locality. And my understanding of that is we cannot, where we are advised in that regard, as an authority, we cannot approve it, and therefore, until that is resolved to the satisfaction under the habitat regulation, I don't know how we can approve it. Secondly, I would like guidance, really, whether this is a sort of application, again, where the Sandford principle needs to be considered as well. as we're dealing with an economic tourism activity and we have conflict in relation to some of the environmental issues that we are regarded to take account of. So I wonder whether Jonathan or Ewan could comment whether we should also be considering the impact of the Sanford Principle in the context of this application, where, as I understand it, environmental issues such as the phosphates and the others that have been mentioned, take precedence over the tourism. I equally don't want to refuse this, but I do not see how in its current state we can approve it.
Yeah, let's go there.
Thank you. Can we come back to the first thing, the legal situation? I share the concerns about the legal situation. The habitat rights are clear in the situation, and we need further advice, and we would have to on that point. I think that Sanford Principle, just so if you want to aware, the Sanford Principle is that if it's a clash between the first part, the first aim of the park and the second part. So the first is to improve landscape and wildlife. That has priority. I think that this has almost by default has been used in the report and the recommendation of the officer. So I think that although it's not referred to directly, I think that there's aware of this in the recommendation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Although I greatly sympathise, I would really like to say that I support this application and would be sorry to see it refused today. But on the other hand, I don't feel comfortable to allowing it because 4 of the recommendations that are to refuse it are not enough information. So, well, they've had time to respond to these and to submit the application to withdraw the case and represent it, having responded to these 4. Then would be a better situation, and I would think then we could permit it 100%, because I know so much of this is economic development for the Pentland area, and I have a great opinion of that area for personal reasons, so I would be delighted to allow this, but not today with these questions. There's not enough information. Thank you. John? Well, we renewed the policy, the economy, and these 2 are one that we shouldn't. This was done years ago. Well, I didn't create this. Well, not the park. It was that these systems should go to the same level. They follow each other. This Elwyn. Edgar, sorry. Well, nobody here wants. I've listened to everyone, but we have to come back to the fact that we are a planning committee and there are rules, and there are 7 implications that reasons we cannot make a decision on these 7. The mistake was to come back in the first place. We have to make a decision today, and the only decision that we can make, in my opinion, is to refuse and to come back It's not going to cost them anything. They have to come the report anyway and come back with this report. And I hope that we have something we can pass next time. But today, the fact that 200 people have written letters, well, you can't, that's not, this is the evidence is what we want. And the evidence is that these 7 elements that haven't been satisfied. There's no choice, in my opinion, that we have to refuse and ask them to come back. Right. Can I ask a question here? It's important. This has been going on for years. And in the report, it says that there is not information in the report from the officers. It's incredible to me that there's not enough information after such a long period. And there's something we need to ask, why is there not enough information? Is it because it hasn't been submitted or because it hasn't been asked for? These from 2 different issues. I'm just asking the question. Richard.
Well, first of all, a bit of background. I became involved in December last year in this application. However, I think with what's been going on with phosphates over the last couple of years, that has inevitably delayed a lot of applications. And I can't speak before I was involved, but certainly we wanted to get to the bottom of the phosphates issue before we started making any firm conclusions on this application. As I say, we held meetings with NRW. We've had updates from Dŵr Cymru on the timings of when wastewater treatment might be upgraded, and that's, they're unable to confirm exactly when that might happen. It might be in the next 2025, it might be 2030, but once we'd grounded that, I think that's where things led on in terms of, right, we need to determine the application, because as we see it, there's an insurmountable issue here that can't, at the moment, can't be overcome.
Yeah, with respect, maybe it was lost in translation, I don't know, but that doesn't really answer the question I asked. The question I asked was, because there's a list of about 6 or 7 different issues where you say, self-said, you're refusing because there's insufficient information. What I'm asking is the insufficient information because you feel they withheld information, or is it because the extra information has not been asked for? Because what I feel is, on a project that as big as this, if information was asked for, it would have been given.
Yeah, I think so. The applicant was made aware of the reasons in end of February, beginning of March time. So admittedly, with regard to the full scope of the reasons, that was the time that was relayed. But I think, as I say, it's the phosphates issue here that has fueled bringing this committee at this time, because even if the other 6 reasons can be overcome, you've still got that first reason which conflicts with the HRA. And I think that's what's fueled bringing the application to a conclusion.
Yeah, sure.
So this comes back to phosphates to refuse it, does it? The phosphates is what refuses it. Just come back to the point. All comes back to points to the phosphate. If it's a matter of the phosphates, if you say that the lake is all right, Bala is all right, but from Codwen down is the problem. I don't think that we can refuse this because of a problem from Codwen down, and the town is right. I don't see how we can refuse it on that. If the problem is further down, then if it comes down to that, then I see. But there are 7 items. Yes, but phosphates, if you said that if we can solve this, we can pass them to make a recommendation with the phosphates. It's more than just phosphates, and perhaps I can expand on what Richard's saying. there are several consultations that have happened with the statutory consultees. For example, the Welsh Government Trunk Railway Agency, they have refused it from the start, without the direction from, given us a direction not to pass it, which also creates problems. They have refused in the original consultation and in the second consultation last autumn too. So they have been quite clear from the start. And as you know, the developers, the candidate can see that there has been a request for more information as we've seen it, and they've been aware of that information right from the start. So we can give permission if that was in place. That's often the case. Well, we could permit if the information was in place with these 6, or we can then put it in place as part of the proposal. Well, this is very often that we have an application, we pass it, but we have to put the conditions in place to resolve the objections. And yet, even though so many people are supportive of it, the people are looking for, okay, we can support this, but put these, if you have these improvements in place before starting the work, and it's not, we need to be positive. So what John said, give the permission and not Battersea. Any chemical factory comes from somewhere that could disappear overnight. This is going to be something that's going to be here for Bala and the community forever. And I know we give permission, but put the guidelines in, and they have to conform with them in full, or they can't do it. I don't want to break the law. I don't at all. I don't want to pollute the air. But to give them the right to continue, but have the guidelines that, yes, you get the commission, but you have to do this, this, and this to come up to the right standards to run and do what you want to do. I don't know if this is something, I think it's a common sense proposal in a way, and I don't know why this can't be proposed. I do propose it, and then Dilwyn has seconded. Just to explain the situation, we have had a proposal and it's been seconded, so we can't accept another proposal. The proposal will be put to a vote, and if it's passed, that's the situation. And if it's refused, then you are entitled to put another proposal forward. So we had good discussion. Can I ask one question? Another question. When did the application going to end? We're talking about 9 years ago. No, it came in, I think, 2021. And I think in December, and then, yes, 2021, then public consultation at the end of 2021 and in 2022, and the second consultation. Well, with pre-application consultation, statutory, with other organizations in the area, and the pre-application was done with the officers, and this was done, no, they didn't have, no, in terms, okay, so now we need to draw to a conclusion, and we'll come to the proposal, therefore, is to refuse. So everybody who's in favor, put your hand up. Those online, if you will put a tick if you agree, cross if you disagree, and then we will count in accordance to the normal methods. So everybody who is in favor, hands up. Just looking at 8. So 8. 8 in favour. Those against the proposal? 4. It has been passed, and the decision is to refuse. Thank you very much. So I'll hand over to Elwyn. The chair back to Elwyn. So Elwyn is still in the other room. Here we are. Mr. Chairman. Right. So I'll hand over to Elwyn Edwards. Fine, thank you very much, Chairman. So we'll go on to number 5 on page 173, or 140. That is, so to page 141. Has anybody any questions on that? 142. 143. 144. 145. 146. 47. 48. 49. 150. 151. 52. 53. 54. 55. There's nothing on 56. 57. 58. 59 and 60. 161. 62. 63. So let's put a hand up. Is there any update there's been since the last meeting?
Such we should know for the board in terms of whether we've been successful with them.
Have we got any timeline, you think?
I'm sorry, Jane, could you speak up because
Oh,
we can't see
sorry.
you.
There we go.
We can't
Is
hear
that
you.
is that
We can't
is that
see-
that better? Is that better now?
Yeah.
We can't hear you. This end.
Can you, yeah, sorry. Do you want me to speak that way? So, in terms of timeline, we haven't got anything as such, but we are progressing it. So I'd like to think, hopefully, with sort of the next 2 committee meetings, there will be an update, further update.
Okay,
This would be wonderful in this area. Fine, thank you very much. 163 and 164. So then we'll go on to section 106 agreements on page 165, 166, 167, application subject to a section 1 agreement which have been completed. And then we go on to outstanding applications where more than 13 weeks have elapsed, 169, 70, 171, 172. So delegated decisions. This is for information. These what have been passed. 174, 175, 176, 177, and 178. Then applications refused, 179, 180, 81, 82, and 83. And there we are. So now appeal decision. So missed this. Can you explain here? So the details of this. Well, Richard, I think, was online. This wasn't run very well. Richard, can you explain?
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The crux of this appeal, if I just give a little bit of background, first of all, it was a former outdoor pursuits centre owned by Conwy Council. They applied to convert it to a dwelling back in 2006, I think it was, and it was approved at committee with a Section 106 agreement. It was a very tight 106 agreement that it would be for somebody. It's an old style Section 106 agreement. Now, normally there would have been 30-mile radius, but this one was reduced down to a 2-mile radius, which excluded Betws-y-Coed and Llanrwst. It was a 106 for anybody employed within that area. It wasn't an affordable, or there wasn't an element of affordability within that 106, but the 106 in itself reduces the price. But as is normal with a lot of these old style ones, we get applications in to either change them to the new style, which is the affordable local occupancy, or to extinguish it in its entirety. In this case, the applicants wanted it extinguished in its entirety. It was refused. Well, we invited them to enter into a new style, affordable local occupancy. They or some. They turned that down and appealed the decision. In these cases, what has to be proved is that it still serves a useful purpose. And in this case, the inspector felt it didn't serve a useful purpose in that it didn't have the affordability element in it. Even with the agreement in place, it didn't reduce the price of the or the value of the property down to an affordable rate. I think they suggested it was the value of the property was over £300,000. Evidence has shown, or experience has shown, that the old style radius 106s reduces values by around about a third, possibly. So that was still outside the element for affordability by any local person seeking or who couldn't get onto the housing market in the usual way. So the inspector felt it didn't serve a reasonable purpose and removed the agreement in its entirety. So that's the background to it.
Thank you very much, Richard. Anyone has any questions about this? Yes, John. Yes, it opens a lot of doors, doesn't it? Because a number of in the last few years we've sold 200,000. Well, now it's 300,000, 400,000 now, and it's a wonderful application. So this opens the door to many other applications, doesn't it? So is there a purpose for a 106 now?
Well, the old style 30-mile radius, what we have found is that where we at properties in the open countryside where the values are significantly higher than urban areas, it doesn't serve a useful purpose, and we have lifted some of them without refusing the applications. But in urban areas where the values are, or smaller properties where the values are lower, they do still serve a purpose. And it's as we said, we have refused applications and we have won on appeals on that basis, that the differential between the open market value and the affordable value is still capable of being reduced sufficient for it to be affordable by those seeking affordable dwellings. So we have refused them and we have won on appeals, but equally we have lost other appeals as well.
If I can come in, just to add to John's point, 100%, the 106 agreements, it's extremely important to ensure local affordable housing. It's extremely important. We want a lot more of them if we can. I think we wouldn't allow this sort of thing, but this is a historical matter, and they say that, so we're not quite sure how to get out of these, but we've won some on appeal, lost others. So it's an area we have to make a contribution to affordability. Fine, thank you very much. Does anybody else want to ask any questions or express an opinion? So the other meeting is going to start straight. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're close, nearly midday now. So we need an hour. Yeah. So if we can have a break for 10 minutes and resume at midday for it's on a different link. And when is it possible for me to have a Zoom link for the next meeting, please?
Recording stopped.
Is it possible to have a Zoom link for the next meeting?